my name is Catrin Pugh. I am 30 years old, living in London, and I work as a physiotherapist, model and a motivational speaker. I experienced a burn injury when I was 19, so I was left with scarring to the whole of my body, a visual impairment, a limb difference and some mobility issues. I identify as a burn survivor, but as everyone knows, with any other health condition, it's far more complex than that. Being a burn survivor was not something I ever obviously planned on being, but I would say it's brought with it so many opportunities and things. So when it happened, obviously, it was one of the worst things that could ever happen to a person, and not only physically but mentally. I had to get through such a change in independence, in psychology, in everything. The first few years were really hard because they were busy with rehabilitation and appointments and surgeries, and it was really hard to see what a future would be. But within that, I was able to see all of these different jobs and different people out there who did all these amazing things, and it actually ended up inspiring me to want to do the same myself. So whilst the first few years were really challenging, they really put me on the course of what my life is now, 11 years on from when I had my injury. So I now work as a physiotherapist because I was inspired by the team around me. I work in burns because of that. I work as a speaker to try and inspire people who are in my position or to motivate others. And I work as a model to represent people with scarring because it's not seen out there. And I think it's really important to see yourself in society so that when you go through something like this, you feel like you've got goals and you've got people to look to. So whilst it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, the impact that it's had has also been really positive, and it's changed me in so many ways that I don't think I would have been changed if I hadn't had it. So whilst people always say, do you wish it had not happened? And sometimes I'm like, I don't actually know, because it really has made me who I am today, and it's got me to where I am today. I think being a healthcare professional is a challenge. I am now, obviously, I've been through the healthcare as a patient, and now I am a professional. And actually always doing the right thing is sometimes really hard in terms of the right things to say, the right things to do, because everyone is so different. For me, I actually had an incredible experience as a patient with my healthcare professional team. I was very lucky that I wasn't really spoken over, I wasn't spoken about when I was there. I was treated with a lot of dignity, respect, and all of those things that we are taught about treating people with. And I think it partially was because I had a lot of advocates around me that wouldn't allow me to not be treated in that way. But I'm also quite a confident, outspoken person, and that very much from the moment I could speak again after I'd woken up from my coma, I very much said, like, what is going on? Tell me what's happening. So I wanted it. And I think that helped in terms of the treatment I had, and everyone very much was on my side, and I felt like everyone was on my side. As time's gone forward, my inpatient stay was incredible in terms of the treatment I had. I would say as time's gone forwards, the healthcare interactions have reduced and the intensity of them has reduced, and therefore you just don't feel as heard or as listened to because you have those shorter sessions and things. I don't necessarily think it's the healthcare providers or the practitioners, because everyone I encountered did tend to have that view of like empathy and respect and dignity, like I say. I think the main thing is just to take it that every person is different, and I luckily was very involved and wanted to be involved, but usually it's the people who aren't like that you actually need to be mindful of, and be mindful of how we're treating, how we're talking to and about them. But yes, I had a really good experience with my healthcare practitioners, which is why I ended up wanting to be one. I don't think I'd want to do that if I hadn't. I would say the burns world is quite an interesting world. And in terms of healthcare professionals, I do think to go into that world, you have to really like what you do because it's so traumatic. So every single person that I worked with and still work with, they're very like passionate and empathetic and really like do understand you. And I feel very lucky that actually I think all of the healthcare professionals stood out in terms of the different disciplines. In terms of actual like people that stood out, my consultant was incredible. He's now retired, but my main consultant was absolutely incredible. He felt like an uncle figure. My mum and dad, who are the same age as him, felt like he was like a head teacher, but he was like kind but firm and knowledgeable. And he, like the day I was admitted, was like, he said to my dad, "What kind of girl is your daughter?" And my dad said, "She's tenacious, determined and optimistic, and he went, okay, we're going to give this a go. It might not work, she might not make it, but we're going to give it a go. And from that day, like, I got that energy from him. He was always like, we're going to give this all a go. So he was amazing. And then the therapy team for me, again, a bit biased because I'm now a therapist, but the therapy team in terms of occupational physio, because in burns they very much overlap, tend to see them both at the same time, or the physio might come in and do some of your splinting, the OT might come in and do some of your exercises, so they blur. They were just incredible. So I was having, when I was in my coma in intensive care, I don't really remember, I was having 2 to 3 hours of therapy every day, and then when I was on the burns ward I was having 4 hours a day, and then when I was discharged I was having 4 hours a day at home plus 1 day in the hospital. So I was with them intensely, and they were the ones who were taking me through like pain and like moving in a way that was painful. So they had to build trust, and they had to really make you want it. So I feel like that built a really good relationship, and it made me realise that you have to be so skilled to do that, but also you really have to, like, I was screaming and shouting and everything, and they just took it like, and I just think that's such a skill to have as a healthcare professional, because it wasn't about them, it was about me in that moment trying to get better, and everything I was going through, they were there to support it, and they always made me feel that as well. So yes, the therapy team were amazing. So when I chose to be a physiotherapist, I was actually a bit concerned that my disabilities would be a hindrance. Obviously, it's like narrowed my scope of practice slightly, in the sense that I'm not as good at some skills. So respiratory, like, I'm not amazing at, because it's very like fiddly with hands, and I need more time, and some of those things they're quite time sensitive. So yeah, I went in thinking, oh, it's going to be a bit of a hindrance, and when I started I was told I might not be able to even do the course. Like, when I did my university degree, the occupational health team were like, we don't think you can do this because we've never had anyone like you, which is a narrow mindset in itself. But actually what I found is, having my injuries and being a physio, it's brought like an additional skill that somebody else doesn't have. And whilst you can see a disability as something that might hold you back in some ways, I feel like it's opened so many doors and so many others. Like, my relationship building with patients is so much easier because they instantly know that I have felt pain, or I felt fatigue, or I felt something by looking at me. And obviously there's lots of healthcare professionals who have been through stuff, use that knowledge to help with their like empathy and stuff, that because mine's so brazenly on my skin, I think people instantly see it and think, oh, okay, I can trust her more. So for me, the patient rapport side of things, it massively helps with. And then just generally as a physio, because we have to build that trust in our patients, they need to trust us. With burns specifically, like, we basically are saying, push your elbows, and if someone has a scar on their elbow and they can't get past, I don't know, like, if they're stuck in flexion and we are pushing that elbow, they have to trust us, and we have to make them understand why we're doing it. So I just think it brings that level of trust, relationship building a lot quicker, because the patient knows I've been through something, I know what the patient's going through, and it's just easy to be nice and honest. So yeah, I always say, we all, as any healthcare professional, you tend to have like a little kit, a toolkit within your mind or in your work. And I would just say, having my disabilities is like one of my tools I can bring out to help with that empathy and understanding side of things. Inclusivity is something that, to be honest, I was completely unaware of before I was someone who was unincluded. And I think that that's often the challenge with the world, is the people that shout about it are the people who aren't included, and the people who are included, who can make a difference, don't know what it's like to not be included, so don't put it to the top of their priority list. I think for me, it's seeing diversity, race, religion, disabilities, genders, and I think disabilities and visual impairment previously have kind of been left out of that conversation. Being that brought in and making sure that that array that reflects their actual real life world is seen in everything, whether that's media and TV, marketing and branding, jobs, like careers. I remember when I was like studying to be a physio, I was like literally looking up online like physios with disabilities, and I literally just couldn't find any. I never came across any. And I know they exist. Like, there are people out there who have disabilities and do this job. There are people out there who are doctors and they have different disabilities or challenges. And I know they exist, but when you don't see it, you feel completely alone. I want to see that diversity within everything, and the whole thing about putting it in textbooks when you're doing your medical literature. Like, I walk into GP appointments and they are so overwhelmed when they see me, because I'll be going in for like a sore throat and they literally will see me, they'll see the scarring. If they haven't worked in burns and plastics, well, maybe not have seen that before, and they literally are like flabbergasted and then ask me a million questions about my burns. And I'm like, I'm actually here for a sore throat. Love that you're interested, but also let's get back to it. It's a lack of like seeing it in our daily routine. I always say, like, in TV shows, why don't we have extras working on the market stalls that are just have disabilities? And it's improving. It's totally improving. People are starting to listen and take note. But yeah, my ideal world would be to see that, so that when something like this happens to you, or you live with any kind of difference, you don't feel on your own. But also the people who don't live with any kind of difference, that they know that the world is not this one box fits all. It's actually this rainbow of people, and normal doesn't exist. I don't really like the word normal anymore because no one is normal, nothing is normal. I think the project that you're developing with Anatome is, to be honest, like, inspired. I remember when I was on my physio course, people would, like, all of the students were asking me questions all the time about my burns, about my scars, about how it affects me, or like how, like, if something we were doing during a practical felt different or whatever. And I was kind of thinking, like, shouldn't we like be being taught this stuff? Shouldn't we be understanding this? So I think the idea of like including all bodies and everybody, rather than just like, I mean, essentially it's just a white 5'6" woman, 6' man with no differences, isn't it, in textbooks? It just, to me, adds to that idea that we're exposing people who don't have differences to it and are going into a world where they're going to encounter people with all these differences, again, who might just have a sore throat but happen to have a disability at the same time. But also it makes people like me and anyone else who identifies as disabled or visibly different, makes us feel seen. And that is like one of the biggest things for me. It's like making us feel seen and knowing that people are learning appropriately, so that when we go into appointments and when we go into healthcare settings, we're not like gawked at or looked at as like this really interesting person they've had in, because it's what they've been seeing in textbooks, so it's ingrained in your brain that that's just normal. But one statement I have always lived by is a positive attitude can lead to positive outcomes, which I'm very aware that if you're just positive, it doesn't necessarily change things. But I have been fortunate enough to be quite glass half full. So the statement I've kind of always lived my life by, specifically since my accident, has very much been trying to approach everything with that positive mindset, which is easier said than done, I would say. But if you can start twisting how you think, it can definitely change your approach into things, and therefore reach different outcomes potentially to what you thought that you could.